back. My name is Lejla. Welcome back to the Trime podcast.
And my name's Leonarda, and welcome back to the Trime podcast.
We made it to episode 2.
Yes. Can you believe it?
What are we going to talk about this episode? I feel like we done all the talking in the first episode.
Well, I think there's loads of things to talk about.
Yeah.
I think we will never stop talking about it.
No, we won't. Will
Ever, because we are in 2024 and the same cycle keeps happening. So we are going to talk about it until we fix it.
Absolutely.
We
Absolutely.
will not die without fixing it.
One thing about us Albanian women is we are stubborn to the core. Like once we get something in our heads, we're like, no, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I get fixated on it. I'm like, I'm going to do it.
Exactly.
Nobody. Pasha Zotin. I'm not even religious, and I still have those tendencies, you know, like how we say like inshallah, like mashallah, like I still say those things, you know, like it's such a big part of who, I guess, like our culture and the way we communicate with each other, that even though I don't believe in God or anything, I still use those terms. And it's interesting how much those parts of our identities plays into everything that we do every single day of our lives.
100%. You will always have a when you're having a conversation with someone, we talk with a lot of emotion. That's the thing with Albanians. We talk with a lot of emotions. We talk with our hands. We talk with what we say. We swear a lot.
I talk with my hands all the time.
Yeah.
I was even watching back our first episode and I was like, oh my God, chill. Like, what are you doing?
Karate moves.
Yeah.
Unlocked.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because just in the last week, like since we recorded, and today was our first day actually launching our platforms, and we've dropped a couple of teasers, and already it's got people talking, and the community's reaction has been so far, I would say, like the majority has been really, really supportive. Some of it has been a bit iffy, but that's okay. We were expecting things like that, and I think the fact that it's kind of snowballed really quickly is that really it's an indication that this space is needed for our women.
100%. And I also do, one thing that I love about our culture is that we are people for each other. We do like to come together. You will have your odd one out that just was dropped too many times in their childhood or something.
Were you dropped on your head in your childhood? I hope not. I hope not.
It's just weird comments that me and Lejla were actually looking at while we were coming all the way here. And I just said to Lejla, just leave it.
I have no patience with me. Like, I can't argue with people on the internet because I just think, like, who are you? Like, I don't know you. I've got no time to argue. Like, stop trying to detract from the real issue at hand here, which is women are victims of gender-based violence. Women are being murdered and killed by men every single day, and our women are either the disparity in statistics of how much our women suffer from gender-based violence is real, and that's the reality. That's why we're here. That's what we're doing.
Exactly. It's a dangerous reality. Everyone needs to really open their eyes and understand that it's not something that you can brush under the carpet because it's not happening to you or in your family. It's happening a lot, and you always see these protests, and because a lot of these things happen, and this year has been crazy. I've just seen so many protests, so many women dying at the hands of their husband or their boyfriend or their dads or their brothers. It's ridiculous. And this is why me and you are here.
Yeah.
Try and stop that as much as possible and create a path for these women to get on that path and save themselves and build a life for themselves, because no one needs a man. Not in this day and age. You can have a baby without a man. Like, come on.
Us lesbians are doing it. We've been doing it for years and years and years, having babies without men. Physically without men. So
exactly. We don't really need men anymore. It's just we don't need to depend on you for nothing. And that's a wake-up call that I think every man needs to hurry up.
Womp womp.
You know.
With that said, I think it's really easy for us to kind of sit here and say these things, right? Like, be really free with our speech. And again, we're going back to that. Most of the women in our community don't actually have that freedom and that safety to come forward and say these things that were these really true, honest things, you know, the way we're being so open about it. They don't have that privilege, that freedom to do so. And a lot of that is because regardless of where we are in the world, us at the diaspora, it seems that we carry a lot of these misogynistic practices from our culture. We could be in America, in the UK, in Germany, in Switzerland, because I mean, they are all over the world, but that's like the majority of where our people kind of tend to migrate and become diaspored. But our journeys is something that I really want to talk about on this episode, of like coming from Kosovo to England and what that was like as asylum seekers or as migrants.
Yeah.
One of the first conversations we had was you said, oh yeah, I just came back on the back of the lorry. and we laughed, and then I was like, it's funny that we laugh about this, but you know, like, this is not normal.
No,
it's absolutely not normal for people to just, it's normal, might be normal for us, but it's not normal for everybody else. Like, for example, for English people or anyone in the West, like, they don't understand that desperation of needing to survive. Like, it's do or die.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we came 1998 February. It was literally the start of the Kosovo War. My parents, it was me, my mum and dad, and my younger brother. It was just four of us, and we had cousins with us, so my uncle and aunts, and there was a group of 3 family cousins. There was 10 families in that lorry. It was kind of ridiculous. And to this day, I will always remember pashteta, like packets of pashtet. So we went onto the lorry. The way my parents explained it to me, because I only remember snippets of it. I remember the noise, and I remember the darkness and the fear.
I was going to say that must have been really scary.
Oh, 5-year-old. What do you know? You don't know anything. Like, when your parents are just like, shui, musbaza. Like, it's not even, it's like, don't make a sound, because otherwise we're going to go back home. They're going to send us back home. And the fear of being killed is far greater than the fear of starting from zero. So my parents walked to France. They walked from Kosovo all the way to pretty much into the mountains in Albania, and past Montenegro and then Austria, got picked up. Then they got dropped off in Germany, and then they continued, because Germany then was sending everyone back.
How long was the journey on foot?
It was, so this is the part that I don't remember, but the way my mum explains it was, my dad had to carry my uncle, my dad, because he had a lung and a half. He grew up in a room in mold, and he didn't get treated as best. And that was when tuberculosis was quite common in Kosovo. So it wasn't, they didn't have the resources to treat this. So my dad had to carry him. My aunt was pregnant, so my mum had to help her. And each had kids. So I was there, my brother was there, and my cousins were there. It was about a good few days, just constantly walking, stopping, walking, stopping, walking, stopping. But it was, the way it's explained is, it's the adrenaline of, you've got young kids that can't even, can't look after themselves, don't know, their language or anything, don't know how to get around in this world yet. It's the fear of, I need to go, otherwise my kids are going to die in Kosovo. And either they will die at the hands of a Serbian police officer, or they're going to die from starvation. It was those 2 options.
And that's the reality, isn't it? It's like, when I say this, and I will repeat this over and over again, for us it was pure survival. It was literally do or die.
Exactly.
There was this, and what you just said is perfect. Like, the fear of being killed was far greater than the fear of starting again from zero.
Exactly. So my parents paid off the lorry driver. It was like marka.
Deutsche marks, yeah.
It was like, I think they paid 10,000, 20,000. So it was all their life savings.
I mean, like, now that's a lot of money. Back then,
imagine.
Yeah.
So 10, 20,000 marka, and with 1 bag of clothes, and that was it. No money, no English, nothing. It was just, we're going to England, because that's the next stop. You can't stay in Germany because they're taking everyone back home. You can't stay in France because they were stealing everyone's stuff, gold, and treating them like animals. So the next best thing was England. It was on the Eurotunnel. That's the one thing that I remember so clearly, so clearly that to this day I will never forget that noise. It's going to make me emotional, but I will never forget it. We were in the back of the lorry, and the lorry driver had to go somewhere safe. If you don't know, for lorries, the Eurotunnel is completely opened, so it doesn't have that layer of soundproofing like if you go in the lorry with a car where you don't hear anything. It's pretty much like being in a lift. But this, it was metal brushing the wall of metal. And just the constant like it was just I don't know how to explain it. Darkness, the noise. Then we came out, and then at that time they didn't have heat sensors for humans. Now they do, but they didn't have heat sensors. And then the lorry driver just kicked us out at Dover.
That was it.
That was it. And then my parents tried to, say we're refugees, and the police were like, "Do you have money for, hotel?" That was, and my dad was like, "I don't, English.
Can't even speak
no
English." Yeah.
So the police paid for our train tickets into Liverpool Street, and then we were stuck in Liverpool Street for about a good few days, just homeless on the benches. I laugh about it, but it's not even a joke, but I don't know how else to respond to it. Because
I think
you
it's
just
more
don't.
like such a big trauma response, isn't it? Because we tell these stories, like I could have cried 10 times. Just I feel the emotions.
Yeah.
I feel everything that you're telling me, the darkness, the loud noises, the not knowing what's going to happen next, the absolute, the sheer terror.
Yeah, the sheer terror. I remember one thing that I didn't mention. When we were crossing the border in Dover from France to England, my cousin was crying, and my uncle had to hold his hand over my cousin, and he almost blacked out because he was a child. He was just crying. But everyone was like, "We don't want to get sent back." So it was just stop, like don't, like just cover his mouth and stuff. So anyways, went to Liverpool Street. My uncle was in the Uchuka. He got wounded, so he got sent back to the UK. He was a British citizen at that time. So he came. He lived in Birmingham, and he still does. He drove all the way, picked us up, and really helped us get registered at the council, get registered as asylum seekers, and that's where it started. We first lived in North Wembley in a council house, and then the bailiffs came and kicked us out. So we then got transferred to Kingsbury, from there to Queensbury, and then we got broken in Queensbury, and then I couldn't stay there. It was such a traumatic experience of knowing that someone has tried to break in, that it brings these like memories back to you of, what if it's someone trying to kill you? You're always in that fight or flight mode. Absolutely. As a refugee, because you're always looking behind your shoulder of, you can be 100% safe, but when you've gone through a refugee experience, when you've gone through coming in with a lorry as a child and then having trauma for the rest of your life, things that trigger it, you will never feel safe. No, you could you could be the only human in Alaska or in the Arctic, and you will not feel safe. So Kingsbury, Queensbury, then we left Stanmore, and then finally Harrow. Changed schools about 7 times, missed out on swimming lessons, and then I had to fill out all the council forms. One thing that I don't really tell a lot of people is I didn't know how to read or write English until I was like 12, because I was kind of like not really looked after, I guess.
Missing out on the education, because there's so much that you have to do for your parents.
Yeah, it's so much to do. Yeah, exactly. So much to do for the parents. But it was really where the teacher sat me down and was like, you need to really start trying. And that's when I had this fire in me start, and I just became a bookworm after that. And that's where my education just flourished so much.
Because you're really well educated all the way up to university, aren't you?
Yeah, I went to university. That was my biggest, I think the biggest point of like being proud for my parents because I am the first grandchild to go into uni, the first one to finish it, the first one to get a career, to build a career, and do so many things like come with you, come out, come here with you. And, now I work at the family business, and that's one of the things that I hang on to so much because it's... Sorry.
It's okay. It's a lot.
I said I'm not going to cry.
No. It's a lot. It's a lot to talk about this. And it's why it's important for you to talk about it, because this is the things that people don't see.
Mm-mm.
When we talk about being refugees and asylum seekers, people don't understand that there was no fun, no joy. Like there wasn't. We still struggle to even reach now.
Yeah, we still do.
Any levels of joy, because we constantly live in that survival, that fight or flight. To be a 5-year-old
100%.
in the back of a lorry in complete darkness, not knowing if you're going to make it to the other side, watch your cousin, go through their own experience.
Literally.
And knowing now as an adult, as a parent, the fear all of the parents in that lorry would have felt.
Oh.
Because they have no way. There is no other option.
No other option. And, I give my hands to my parents because I genuinely do not know if I could do the same thing.
Yeah.
I genuinely, in my heart, I don't know if I could leave my own parents and not see them for 25 years.
Everything everyone, all the, I guess, it wasn't safe for our people in Kosovo back then, but at least they had their families and that kind of a little bit of comfort, right?
Exactly.
Their food, the language. To leave all of that behind and to have to go to a completely different country where you don't know anybody, you don't know the language, you have no money. Again, you do that out of sheer fear and survival.
Exactly.
But this is the reality, is that however many years or decades and decades onwards, we are still suffering from that trauma.
100%. And we suffer. I always have this conversation with a lot of people, English people, that ask me, how are you a refugee? You've got such a thick accent. You're so well spoken. And it's because, number one, I went through a lot of racism with my parents. Not me personally, but racism towards my parents that made me really stubborn and said, you know what, I'm getting this accent on point so that, tomorrow, the day after, whenever it happens, I will stick up for myself. And I've had to stick up for myself and my husband because, again, I speak bilingual. I speak both languages fluently. But the one thing that really pisses me off about this whole experience is that argeta pashtet, because all the boxes is a trigger. I cannot eat it.
Of course. See, it's those things.
It makes me throw up. It makes me throw up. And it didn't really click into my head why until I really, until you become an adult, until you start processing everything. But what I was going to say before I started crying was I work in the family business, and it's the one thing that we have that is linked to 7 generations of our business back at home. And it's also just an example of our link to back home, because it's an example to a link to my grandparents that I never got to know ever. It's also a example of the hard work that my dad put in, which he put in so much work. My dad's nearly 60. He still works. He doesn't stop.
People don't stop. We
He
just
doesn't
don't stop.
No, he doesn't stop. Even though I've told him, you need to just go, Bob. Just, go. He's in Kosovo for a month, so I'm glad he's listening. But, when I think about my parents' journey, the one thing that I feel regretful for is that they've missed out on their parents. And this is why I will always see my parents at least once a week, because nestra mas nestre, they're not going to be there. So I give them so much grace for everything. But our childhood, when you're the oldest or the oldest two, me and my brother, all of our toys came from the toy bin. All of our clothes came from those massive bins back in the day that they would just have them in these charity bins. And my mum and aunt would dig down and get us new clothes and toys. And cinema was never a thing. Holidays was never a thing. We only got our citizenship in 2006. So my granddad passed away. My grandma passed away. Loads of uncles passed away. So by the time I went back, I was 13 years old. My granddad from my mum's side, so my dad's mum, then got cancer. So it was never like
never ending.
It was never ending,
Yeah.
and it's a constant thing. And the thing that I'm sad that I missed out on is building those relationships, because you would hear other kids go, "Oh, I went to my nan's house."
Yeah.
And you never had that.
No, we didn't have that. And I so relate to that. Like, you watch your English friends, like, on the weekend going to their grandparents, maybe going to the countryside or, I don't know, wherever their family members were. And we just didn't have that. Like, the community back then, the Albanian and community back then was tiny.
So tiny.
It was so small in London. I mean, the majority of us were in London, and those of us that were in London was just like a handful.
Exactly. I remember my dad, because he is a veteran, he was a soldier in Yugoslavia, and most of my uncles were, and then we also had an uncle that did fight during the Kosovo War, and my dad set up charities, Kryche Kuch.
Mm-hmm.
He would round Albanians. They would work all day, and literally 80 to 90% of what they've worked and their salaries would go back home. And that's what really funded, the soldiers. It's what helped my paralysed grandma during the war. It's what helped a lot of people just feed kids, and, hospitals and doctors. And so, again, I'm proud at the fact that my dad, even though he wasn't there because he wanted to go, my mum was like, nope. No. Ashcheki niet bile, you stupid.
We've only just made it here, stop.
So my mum was like, nope. Again, I got to pass to me. It's your document. School. But he spent the last 25 years working so hard, which is where I get my work ethic. I get my work ethic from my dad. It's toxic work ethic, because it's like 4 a.m. to 12.
Believe me, we're so similar, but we do it to each other as well.
We do. I mean, Lejla was like, I was up at 4 a.m. this morning, and I was
like, voice notes. Oh no, I promise to not do that going forward, because we do. And everything you're saying is, so not just is it so moving emotionally, but I can connect to so much of it, even if my story has a slightly different context of how I came to England. That fear, that terror, that just that state of survival, that fight or flight, we all know it too well.
We do.
We all know it too well. And, hearing you talk about your dad and uncles and other men in the community that were working and sending all their money back home and being charitable and caring for the community is the exact reason why I love us.
Yes.
I love us.
Yes.
Because we care for each other so much. We have this really beautiful community collectivist spirit.
Yeah.
And it can work so much in our favour. It can also be the death of us.
Yeah.
But we have this really beautiful side where we really care for each other, and we do not let each other go without.
No.
And that part of who we are, I couldn't be more proud. Same. And it's parts that the world doesn't get to see that. The world doesn't understand that, like, during the war, the experience of those of us who were outside, like diaspora, of course, we can never compare to what it was actually like to be there in the war.
Never.
We did not stop outside the diaspora. We did not stop doing whatever we could to help back home. So when the war was happening in Kosovo, it was in 1998, right?
Yeah.
And I was in school. Now I'm going to get emotional.
Oh.
And we were all just so affected and so distraught and so traumatized by what was happening. So I felt really powerless, as a child. You're like, what can I do? Anyway, I went to school one day and I wrote a speech.
Yeah.
About what was happening in Kosovo. Who knew where Kosovo even was?
No one knew.
People, they barely even knew where Albania was, let alone Kosovo, and trying to explain to them that there was this active genocide that was happening for years before the war people didn't even really understand what genocide was, what was ethnic cleansing. They didn't know what an asylum seeker was. They didn't really know what a refugee was. And I thought, I can't have this. Like, at least at my school, let me try and do something. I was so young. I was 1988. I was born, I was 10, around that age. And I wrote this speech and I asked my head teacher, if I could say the speech out loud in assembly, just was talking about what's happening. And when I said, after I wrote the speech and I said it and I got up, in fact, actually I broke down halfway through and my best friend had to finish it for me. But as a result of that, we filled up the school and all the teachers were crying. Oh. Everybody that was in the room was crying. All the parents that were there were crying. And we actually ended up filling up a truck of donations to send back to the refugee camps because I stood up and told the story of what was happening.
I'm so proud of you.
I was a kid, I know. And we all just felt so hopeless. Like every single one of us felt it. To watch my parents, my mum in particular, have no communication, no contact with her. She didn't know. There was a period where my mum didn't know if her mum and her sister were alive or dead. My nan had cancer during the war and she'd had surgery on her spine and she was paralysed for a big part of the war as well. My mum, at one point, didn't know if they were dead or alive because there was just no communication.
And you think of the worst things.
Absolutely, of course you do. Grieving. Of course you do. And to watch your parents deteriorate overnight. And my dad, how we came to England in the first place is my dad and my family back home were quite publicly resisting the regime. So my dad is a well-known journalist even to this day. And back then he was a well-known journalist. He had the courage and the bravery to speak up against Slobodan's regime, against the Serbs, against the genocide and the ethnic cleansing. And as a result, my dad had to flee. And we then followed suit quite shortly after him.
Still traumatic. And I'm thankful for the fact that, for example, we weren't stuck in a freezer lorry or something like that. Yeah. So everyone that's come into this country, whether it's been a plane, luxury plane, or how you came after your dad or how I came, every single one of us has trauma from it.
Carries the trauma,
it doesn't need to be so bad and it doesn't need to be the best in the world. You don't need to come into the country in a first-class private jet to avoid trauma. You are still going to get trauma because of what you carry with you and how different you feel.
Absolutely.
Every single day. The way I was brought up is at home you are Albanian, Kosovan Albanian. Outside you are English. That's it. You need to blend in, put your head down. You have no opinions. This is not your home. Home is what we left.
Oh God, just listening to it, it's so exhausting, isn't it? All these things we carried as young children, we came through Europe. It was my mum, 3 young children. My brother was only 16 months at the time, tiny baby. We all had fake passports. We couldn't travel. I mean, no one could have travelled with their passports then anyway, exactly. But ours in particular had to be fake because they were actively seeking us out, the Serbs and the militia. So they weren't just sending police, they were sending militia as well. And so we had fake passports. In fact, my brother, who's the middle child, he was a girl on his passport. So my mum had to grow his hair quite long for the journey.
That's so... It's funny. It's just the desperation.
It is. It's desperation, isn't it? My mum was younger than me when she had to come here. And I'm now 35 and my daughter's 10. I can't imagine having to do that with Bella. No. I can't imagine. I didn't think we'd get so emotional.
I know.
I can't imagine having to do that.
Yeah.
With Bella now.
No.
that sheer terror and that sheer fear, and what it's like coming to a new country and not knowing anybody, having this really small community. And that's how we've grown, you know, like as a community in England. And I mean, but there wasn't a lot of us in the mid 90s.
There wasn't. And I can so proudly say that a lot of us have gone through hurdles. A lot of us have gone through university. If we haven't gone through university, we've worked, we've built businesses, we've bought houses, we've built stuff back at home, we've bought houses back at home. We have flourished. We have sent so much money back. And we've built families here. You know, I've got a nephew, and when I see him and how close he is to all of us and to my parents, specifically my parents, I am so happy for him that he never in his entire life has to think about, I'm not going to be raised alongside my aunts, my uncle, my grandparents. He always has all of us around. And I'm so just grateful to my parents that they've, you know, they made that step. I'm grateful for them, but I'm sad for them at the same time, because they've missed out on growing up with their siblings, on their own nephews and, you know, nieces, on, you know, building a life with their parents. You know, one thing that I always get sad about is that my dad's parents have never in their entire life seen me or my brother.
That's just
ever.
like, when you think about it like that, it's like,
you just, and you kind of just, and I'm sad, but I can only imagine the grief my dad carries. And he still goes back home. You know, my grandma died 4 years ago, and each time I go to Kosovo, it's like my grave. Sorry.
it's okay. Do you know what, like, you sharing this and you crying, our mums didn't get this.
No.
And that's why this project, Trime, not just the podcast, but everything as a whole, trying to create this healing environment for the women in our community, is so important, to have your voice heard and to see your emotions, because our mums didn't get that.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I've never in my entire life spoken about it, ever, with anyone. And anyone that I've spoken to about it has been like my manager, and we spoke about it because I don't know if you remember, but the child that washed up, the Syrian child that washed up, and I cried in the office, and I said to her, I was like, you know, it hurts because that could have been me. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I came in the back of a lorry. She's like, why are you lying? And I said, I'm not
lying. It's not, this is what I'm saying. It's not funny, ha. Like, this was real. This really happened.
And she was like, how are you so happy? And how are you just giggling away? And I said to her, I'm giggling away because what am I supposed to do?
What's the alternative?
What is the alternative? You know, I'm not the one that should be the most upset. It's the parents, you know, all of our parents that left their parents and their siblings. That's who because I could never imagine being far away from my own family. And it's just because we're so tight, because we've had to be tight, because there's no one else. We grew up with no uncles, no aunts, no grandparents. The grandma that I did lose from cancer, unfortunately, 4 years ago in COVID, she was the only grandparent that I knew, and I actually grew up into my 20s, and I loved her. She was just such a boss. I just loved her so much. She just spoke her mind, and she was like 67 when she died. 76, sorry.
Did you definitely take after her then?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I definitely do. And, you know, she would just be like, you know, if your mum pisses you off, tell me.
And this is, people, I think sometimes, for example, like maybe our English peers, English friends, just people in England in general, in the UK or anywhere in the world, they might not understand certain parts of our culture, but by sharing these experiences, maybe it kind of gives a bit of an insight of why we do remain so loyal to our culture, and and in turn, why we then carry these other dangerous parts of our culture too. But we have to share these parts, you know, these
have
real, all the good, all
Yeah.
the bad. Like, it's very complex.
Yeah.
It's not a one-dimensional thing. It's
No.
multi-layers, because you also have to remember that for all of our mums and our aunts and everyone who migrated because of the genocide and because of the war, they too were experiencing other forms of abuse and violence elsewhere in their
100%.
lives, whether it was from their husbands, whether it was from the family or the wider community. It was happening.
Yeah.
But the focus was on just survive. They
Yeah.
had no choice to even seek
Yeah.
for help.
No, they had no choice. And straight after the war, a lot of women weren't allowed outside of their houses. They would have to serve the men, cook for the men, have kids. It was like this: we need to have kids.
Yeah.
We need to strengthen the population. It's kind of like, you know, what happened after the Holocaust.
Yeah.
You know?
And World War II, and because they
and
call it the
World War II,
baby
yeah.
boomers. Yeah.
Yeah, but of course this is not in the level of those genocides, but it's still a genocide. We weren't a big population. We lost almost 1 million people through, you know, being pushed out of the country, and all those 1 million people had to leave their homes, go into Europe, and have built now their life there. And then when we do come back, when we go back to Kosovo, especially in the summer, the amount of people, everyone is speaking the same language. Everyone, not that there's anything wrong with people that don't speak, to say, you know, speak Albanian, but I think it's just for someone that grew up in a place where you're reminded that you're an outsider 24/7. It's nice to know that you kind of belong there, but it's a catch-22 because you go back.
Oh my God, you know,
and you're like, I can't stay here. And
yeah,
then you come
because
back here.
I was literally having the same conversation yesterday with another Kosovan woman, and it was that kind of, when you're here in England, you know, it's like you don't quite belong.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm British, but I know I'm not English. I don't feel English in any sense of the word. But then when I go back home, I'm like, oh yeah, this is home. But then I'm like, oh, I don't feel quite Kosovan either. It's like this hybrid identity. And that's why I said on the last episode that being British, Albanian is like a completely different culture. And I think something that we should touch on as well is like, I use the terms Albanian and Kosovan, or Albanian Kosovo, very interchangeably. I know that we are both from Kosovo, and then there are other women who are Albanian and are from Albania, and people identify however they choose to, and I know that it's a big debate in amongst our people in the community of what we should call ourselves, but essentially we can't erase these stories of the women, of you know, the trauma that they've been through, of the abuse and violence that they've experienced, whether it was through genocide, whether it was through war, whether it was through domestic abuse or honour-based abuse or femicide, or, you know, it doesn't matter. The fact is what we're trying to do here in this space is open it up to women, whether you're from Shqipni, whether you're from Kosovo.
Albanians from Macedonia, Albanians from Molichin,
yes.
Albanians from Turkey, anywhere that there are Albanians. We are not distinguished. The one thing I would like to say is Kosovo is Kosovo, and it's fought so hard to be Kosovo.
To be
I do not want to take that away from
absolutely
it.
Not.
But we are
absolutely not.
Albanians.
We want to be like accessible
to
you know,
everyone.
and inclusive to all Albanian women, as you say, like wherever they are in the Balkans, wherever they are diaspora, we want to be accessible. We want them to know that this is a welcoming, safe space for them.
Exactly.
We really want to hear from women, maybe you were there in the war. We want to hear, like, we want you to, you know, like, we want you to see that this is a safe space for you to come forward and share these experiences, because your stories matter so much. In order for us to progress and to move on into the next chapter for the women in our community, it's really important that we feel validated and seen and heard for everything that we have experienced. Every single story matters.
100%. And it really educates us because we weren't there.
Absolutely.
And it just, you know, my husband was there throughout the whole war. And his mum, his mum is from Jakov, and you know the worst massacres happen in Jakov. She lost all hope. She lost all hope. My husband was in Pristina. She lost all hope, and she just prepared herself to die. So it's, you know, when I hear him talk about it, it makes me, you know, understand the trauma that he went through as a child and the trauma that his aunts went through and his mum went through. And, the fight or flight, and it was a war. There was no shops. But anyways, my point is, it would be
to hear those stories and those experiences would
and
be
really,
absolutely, it will be so insightful. This isn't about just trauma dumping and just sharing these awful traumatic parts just for some clout or something. This is this is serious stuff. Like, in order for this community to know that every single one of them matters,
100%.
I feel like we have to go back to the beginning, to our stories, to what our grandmas went through, to what our mums went through, and really bring them to the forefront.
Yes, we do, because those stories is what will help us make the biggest change. Those stories is what will allow other people to be educated in a way, especially those people that are not exposed to any of these stories, or have, thankfully lived a very free life.
I wonder what that's like, though. I have to say, like, every time I talk to someone and say like they've never experienced anything abusive or traumatic, I'm like, what does that feel like? What is it like to be the chosen people? Because in my world, I think everybody has trauma. And then I have to remind myself, no, that's not the case. And it's just so it's so sad that through generations, our people have carried this. If we go back to Albania during their during the communism, even those stories are so important. So if you are an Albanian woman and you did live through the communism regime, please come forward.
Yeah.
Like, if you feel ready to share those parts of your lives, like, they're just so important.
So
and it's really important to understand that what women, the kind of abuse and violence that they experience, because we know that sexual violence was used as a big, massive weapon to our women. Breaking down those taboos around shame and around dishonor, we need these stories in order to be able to do that. We need people to see and hear these women for what they went through.
Yeah, we really do, because shame and honor is what put a lot of women in shackles, and they couldn't leave. It was shame and honor. You've done this with this person. You have to now spend the rest of your life.
Even through sexual violence.
Yeah, even through sexual violence. Like, you have to marry your rapist.
Yeah. Oh.
Like, do you know what? Like, it's just.
Yeah, I just can't.
It brings tears.
And I just think because this is clearly a very emotional episode, but it's, again, I keep repeating the same thing. This is so needed in order for us to move forward. But these women, they really did suffer this. Our grandmas suffered this. Our mums suffered this. And I want all of the women through these generations to feel seen and heard. I don't want, this podcast is not about trying to shame anybody, trying to judge any of our mums for anything.
No.
Like, this is really to open that space through generations to create that healing, because it's got to start somewhere.
It has to.
And if we have to be the ones who start it here in this community, then so be it. I don't care what backlash we get.
Yeah.
And this is my point, is going back to what we were saying in the beginning, all those comments on TikTok, I don't care. It's just boring.
I came in the back of a lorry. Do you think your comment is really going to put tears in my eyes?
Right? It really is. Like, I have to remind people, like, this is so irrelevant. What's relevant is our women are dying. They have been dying. They've been victims of abuse and violence for the longest time, and it's time for us to progress and to provide this healing space, which is Trime. So please, if you want to come forward and share these parts of your lives, you don't even have to be English speaking. You could be just completely Albanian speaking, because we're going to be working on the translation and things like that. So just know that the space is here if you feel like it's the right time for you to come forward.
I can't believe it's been so emotional.
Yeah, but I feel really privileged to hear that part, because, as I said, my journey coming to the UK wasn't on the back of the lorry. It was still traumatic, but it wasn't on the back of the lorry.
It still matters. And the journey, I've made my peace with it. It's that bit that I've made my peace with it. The peace that I have never, and I don't think I will ever make my peace with, is the fact that because someone doesn't like the fact that we are ethnically Albanian, mostly Muslim, decided to
just almost wipe us out.
Yeah, almost wipe us out. And I've missed out on growing up with family. Yeah. That is the one thing that I will never in my entire life ever make peace with, because I do not have those relationships. And to this day now, I carry that in adulthood, and it's also why I'm friendly, but I like my own silence.
Yeah.
I like silence. It's peaceful.
Yeah.
It's so sad to say.
Absolutely. And see, I'm the complete opposite. I don't like silence because I don't find silence peaceful. I find silence terrifying.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's also a part of my journey coming to the UK, which maybe I will share further on down the line. But today felt like it was just important just to give you the space.
Thank you so much.
No, like, dude, don't thank me. Don't thank me. You're literally my partner in this.
I know.
I've got to thank you.
I know.
I've got to thank you for being so open and just sharing that. You're going to make so many, not just women, but so many people feel so seen by just sharing that.
That's my main goal. I just hope that everyone that went through a similar or a less traumatic experience feels heard and feels validated, because we are all in the same boat. You know, even if you're not Albanian and you are a refugee, it's the same journey. It's the same sacrifices. It's this burden that you will carry for the rest of your life, and your kids will carry for the rest of your life, for their life. Even though you're doing the best for them, it is something that unfortunately we have to live through. My youngest siblings, my 3 youngest siblings, were all born here, and they're the ones that are so privileged that I've never had to go through all of that, never had to wear clothes out of a bin, and live on bread and milk in the UK. You when you say that to someone, I had to live 6 months to a year on bread and milk during the war because we had to work really hard to send money back, and also because we were being supported by the government. It's something that as an adult now I can't imagine, but it just had to happen. And so I'm grateful for the space that I can actually say this for the first time. And I know my parents are going to cry when they see this, but I
hope they feel like they're when they see this, I hope they feel really, really seen. Yes, I really
do. And I just want to tell them that I love them so much, and I'm so happy for them. So happy to have them.
Yeah, I know you love your parents a lot.
I think a lot of Albanians are going to be like, we love our parents. Because we do. We have this toxic relationship with them, but deep down we're like,
and we're going to explore that on here, and that this is when we go back to the complexities, we're going to explore all of that. But now that we've shared this, and you've shared this big massive part of your life, that beginning of your journey to the UK, we can begin to heal those gaps now. We can begin to bridge those gaps. So I know it's going to sound so cliche, I'm really sorry, but the only way is up.
Yes, the only way is up.
I'm cringing at myself for saying that. But it's true. Yes. Now that you've started and you've shared this part of your life, the only way out is through. Yeah. We said we're stubborn. We're here to stay. We're not going anywhere.
Exactly. We're not going even if you ask.
So thank you so much for joining us for episode 2.
I can't believe episode 2. We've worked so hard.
We've worked so hard, and we now are all over social media. Yes. You can find us on Instagram at the Trime Podcast, Trime Podcast. On TikTok, we are Trime, and you'll find us across Facebook and YouTube with the same name as well. Exactly. By the time this is posted, they would have already seen and heard the first episode. Be nice to us, please. Be nice to us. But until next time, dong.